It's a little chilly out. Hey guys, it's Warner's. I normally make optimized yet thematic character builds, but today I decided to rank cold damage spells from the 2024 Player's Handbook, as well as any other cold damage spells that are available with the current rule set. They changed a few of the spells and how they work, and then some of the spells they haven't changed very much, but they just work differently with the other rules. Also, spells that give you a choice of any elemental type I will not be covering today. The main reason why is I have gone over them before in other videos, and I really want to focus on the cold damage only spells, and also some spells that do offer some other alternative damage options, but it isn't all elemental damage options. For example, spells like Spirit Shroud, where you can choose between cold, radiant, or necrotic. The reason I'm doing this is because next week I'm planning to have a character build based around cold damage. So I wanted to sort of break it all down here. Also, when I break down a spell and talk about it with the stat block, it does really well on my shorts feed, so there's that too. One of the things that's interesting about cold damage is it is the most resisted damage type, at least based on the 2014 Monster Manual, where it has 46 resistant creatures. In comparison to fire damage has 37 resisted creatures. But fire damage also has 40 creatures that are immune to fire, whereas cold damage, in comparison, only has 20. And because of this, at least based off the 2014 Monster Manual, if you have a feat like Elemental Adept and you specify cold damage, there's only going to be 20 creatures you can't hit with it. Also, in the 2014 Monster Manual, there's only 6 damage types that creatures are vulnerable to, and cold has 4 creatures that are vulnerable to cold damage. Another thing that can sometimes make cold damage spells not as great as other damage types is the fact that a lot of cold damage spells are Constitution saving throws, which makes sense because it's essentially your body trying to deal with the cold temperature that you're enduring. But Constitution saving throws are one of the highest saving throws that creatures have, at least in the 2014 Monster Manual. So I guess we'll see in February how the 2025 Monster Manual is looking. But I don't think resistance, immunities, or concentration saving throws will be much different. Before we go any further, I would love to talk to you about Only Crits. Only Crits is one of the best dice companies around. They have some of the most beautiful, unique dice I've seen online. They're currently offering post Black Friday deals. So if you're looking to get your dice loving family member a great gift card opportunity, right now they're offering $200 gift cards for $150. And for the extra special dice lover, $500 gift cards for $350. And just look at these beautiful dice. They also have the FU and FME dice, and I love these dice. They're so funny and amazing, and it's just great to roll a nat 20 and be able to say F you to your DM. Go ahead and click my affiliate link down below, and as long as you put coupon code COMRADE at checkout, I will get a little bit of a commission for every purchase. And now let's go back to the video. With that all being said though, let's go ahead and go into the spells. I'm going to start from cantrips and make my way up. So the first spell we have is not from the new Player's Handbook, but it is still available to use. It is from the Elemental Evil Player's Companion, and it is the Frostbite cantrip. You cause numbing frost to form on one creature that you can see within range. The target must make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the target takes 1d6 cold damage and has disadvantage on the next weapon attack roll it makes before the end of its next turn. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this cantrip, and it's essentially Vicious Mockery, but worse. Also, Vicious Mockery's damage has been buffed with the 2024 rules, so it used to be that Vicious Mockery did a 1d4, and then Frostbite did a 1d6, so it was a little bit higher, but now it's the same damage, but it's a worse save, being a Constitution saving throw. So I will be putting this in D tier. And then the next spell we have is Ray of Frost. It's another cantrip, action to cast. A frigid beam of blue-white light streaks towards a creature within range. Make a ranged spell attack against the target. On a hit, takes 1d8 cold damage, and its speed is reduced by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. The new Player's Handbook didn't change this spell basically at all, but the fact that there's more ways in the game now to be able to use cantrips as part of your attack action, as in with the Valor Bard, the Eldritch Knight, and the Bladesinger Wizard, and there just being a lot of other speed reduction abilities in the game now. This can be a great combo with the other new abilities available in the game. Not only that, but warlocks can now take agonizing blast and repelling blast with Ray of Frost, which would do less damage than Eldritch Blast, but would have potentially really cool effects, especially at lower levels. For a cantrip, I'm going to be putting Ray of Frost in A tier. And now we have the beloved Armor of Agathys. I've already talked about this spell a lot, so I'm going to keep this brief. First level spell, bonus action casting time, which is new, it used to be in action. Protective magical frost surrounds you, you gain 5 temporary hit points. If a creature hits you with a melee attack roll before the spell ends, the creature takes 5 cold damage. The spell ends early if you have no temporary hit point. And then every spell slot you use above first, it goes up by 5 HP and 5 damage. A lot of you probably already know this, but with the new wording of Armor of Agathys and the fact that the new version of the game has a lot more ways to gain temporary hit points, this makes Armor of Agathys an even more amazing spell than it already was, because now when you get temporary hit points from a different source, you can maintain your Armor of Agathys with those hit points. And when creatures hit you, they will take the damage that you initially cast with. And then that alone would be enough to make the spell so much better, but it is now also a bonus action casting time. Melee Warlocks rejoice. Armor of Agathys is going in S tier. Just so you know, this being my first S tier rank spell, I want you to also know that S tier is the tier that I consider the most powerful, but also potentially problematic spells. Just keep that in mind. And the next spell we have is Frost Fingers. You might have not even have heard of this spell. It is an expanded rules spell from Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden. It's a first level spell, action to cast, 15-foot cone, freezing cold blast from your fingertips in a 15-foot cone. Each creature in that area must make a Constitution saving throw, taking 2d8 cold damage on a failed save or half as much damage on a successful one. The cold freezes non-magical liquids in the area that aren't being worn or carried. So this is basically Burning Hands, but with a Constitution saving throw, and it has a flavorful ability to freeze non-magical water. I would say this spell is not very good, and that's probably why you haven't heard of it much. I like that it has the ability to freeze things. It's a nice little flavorful addition to the spell that could come in handy very rarely, but in probably very funny ways in campaigns. With that all being said, I'm gonna put it in C tier, mostly because of the fun mechanic to freeze things. If it wasn't for that, it would definitely be in D tier for me. Next, we have Ice Knife. Ice Knife actually didn't change at all. It's a first level spell, action to cast. You create a shard of ice and fling it at one creature within range. Make a ranged spell attack against the target. On a hit, the target takes 1d10 piercing damage. Hit or miss, the shard then explodes. The target and each creature within 5 feet of it must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or take 2d6 cold damage. And then the initial damage never increases, but the cold damage increases by 1d6 for every spell slot level above first. I like this spell, but because the damage doesn't increase much as you upcast it, I would consider this an A spell at early levels, but it very quickly becomes not very good. So that being said, I'm going to be putting it in the B tier. All right, we made it to second level spells, and with that we have Rime's Binding Ice. This comes from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. Second level spell, action to cast. A burst of cold energy emanates from you in a 30-foot cone. Each creature in the area must make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, a creature takes 3d8 cold damage and is hindered by ice formations for 1 minute, or until another creature within reach of it uses an action to break away the ice. A creature hindered by ice has its speed reduced to 0. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage and isn't hindered by the ice. This spell, in my opinion, is amazing. First of all, it's a half damage on a save spell, which those spells instantly become way better in my book because it'll at least do some damage to the creatures that it hits. And spells that stop movement are typically really good, but this spell is very unique in that the creature doesn't make a saving throw again to get rid of the speed reduction. They instead have to use an action to break the ice, or have another creature use an action to break the ice. So as long as you can get a few creatures to fail their saving throw, they're taking a decent amount of cold damage and their speed is reduced to 0 at least for 1 turn. That's some really good control, especially at early levels with it being a level 2 spell. I would say if your class has access to this spell, even if you're not going for a cold damage focused build, highly recommend picking this up. This is an S tier spell. Alright, now we have a weird one. This is also from the Elemental Evil Player's Companion. We have Snilloc's Snowball Swarm. Second level spell, action to cast. It is a 90-foot range. A flurry of magic snowballs erupts from a point you choose within range. Each creature in a 5-foot radius sphere centered on on that point must make a dexterity saving throw. A creature takes 3d6 cold damage on a failed save or half as much damage on a successful one. So yeah, it is 3d6 damage on a single target. It is a dexterity save, which is slightly better than con saves, but it's just not that much damage. And yes, it does upcast by 1d6 per spell level, but I really don't see a situation where you would cast this unless you just think it's cool. I do like the flavor of the spell, but that being said, that's going to be in D tier. Now we're at 3rd level spells, and this is a spell I'm very excited to talk about. So we have Hunger of Hadar. There is a very big change in this spell with the 2024 Player's Handbook that I love. 3rd level spell, action to cast, 150 foot range. You open a gateway to the Far Realm, a region infested with unspeakable horrors. A 20-foot radius sphere of darkness appears, centered on a point within range, and lasting for the duration. The sphere is difficult terrain, and it is filled with strange whispers and slurping noises, which can be heard up to 30 feet away. No light, magical or otherwise, can illuminate the area, and creatures fully within it have the blinded condition. Any creature that starts its turn within the area takes 2d6 cold damage. Any creature that ends its turn there must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or take 2d6 acid damage from otherworldly tentacles. So this is an exception spell where it does do a second damage type, but I like this spell enough that I decided I might as well put it on this list, and it does do cold damage. First of all, it's a lot more clear on how the darkness situation works with it. It says now, with the new rules, that no light, magical or otherwise, can illuminate the area, and then creatures within it are blinded. It doesn't say magical darkness, but it does say that there is darkness in there. So how I would interpret it is that any creature that has dark vision can see within it as long as they are not in the Hunger of Hadar, but as soon as they enter the circle, any creature is blinded unless they have blind sight. This is the exciting thing though that changed about this spell. Now it says this: the cold and acid damage, your choice, increases by 1d6 for each spell slot above 3rd level. This is especially good because this is mainly a warlock spell, so the fact that it didn't upcast in the old rules was really weird. Aberrant Mind sorcerers also get access to this spell, and I don't feel like the damage boost is enough to want to upcast it, but as a warlock that doesn't get the choice to upcast, it's nice to get a little extra damage. I'm gonna put this spell in A tier. Alright, the next spell we have is Spirit Shroud. I have to say, in the context of conjure minor elementals existing in the game right now, this spell is a little overshadowed by it, but in my opinion, I think conjure minor elementals is a little too overpowered, so I feel a little better using Spirit Shroud instead. And because conjure minor elementals is only a wizard and druid spell, Spirit Shroud is still very good and very viable in a lot of builds. 3rd level spell, bonus action casting time. You call forth spirits of the dead, which flit around you for the spell's duration. The spirits are intangible and invulnerable. Until the spell ends, any attack you make deals 1d8 extra damage when you hit a creature within 10 feet of you. The damage is radiant, necrotic, or cold, your choice when you cast the spell. Any creature that takes this damage can't regain hit points until the start of your next turn. In addition, any creature of your choice that you can see that starts its turn within 10 feet of you has its speed reduced by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. When you cast this spell using a spell slot of 4th level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for every 2 slot levels above 3rd. And with warlocks being able to do 3 attacks now at high levels when they're melee, I think this spell is great. So I'm gonna put it in A tier. Oh my god. I was getting a little hot in that, guys, and that's perfect timing because the next spell we have is Fire Shield, which is a 4th level spell. If you're confused by me including Fire Shield in the cold damage video, I'll explain very quickly. Casting time of 1 action. It is not concentration and lasts for 10 minutes. Wispy flames wreathe your body for the duration, shedding bright light in a 10-foot radius and dim light for an additional 10 feet. The flames provide you with a warm shield or a chill shield, as you choose. The warm shield grants you resistance to cold damage, and the chill shield grants you resistance to fire damage. In addition, whenever a creature within 5 feet of you hits you with a melee attack roll, the shield erupts with flame. The attacker takes 2d8 fire damage from a warm shield or 2d8 cold damage from a chill shield. So if you use this in the chill shield form, you get resistance to fire damage, and then anytime anyone hits you with a melee attack, they take 2d8 cold damage. But the best part about this spell is that it is not concentration concentration. It unfortunately is still an action to cast, but sorcerers do get access to this. I know that sorcerers aren't typically classes that like to be up in the front lines taking hits, but if you have a multi-class build or if you happen to be a sorcerer that's taking hits, might as well put Fire Shield up with a quicken spell, and then you got fire resistance or cold resistance depending on the situation. And that little bit of damage that enemies take by hitting you doesn't hurt at all. That being said, I'm putting Fire Shield in A tier. Now we have a spell that I personally think is underrated, and that is Ice Storm. Ice Storm is a 4th level spell with an action to cast. It has a 300-foot range. Hail falls in a 20-foot radius, 40-foot high cylinder centered on a point within range. Each creature in the cylinder makes a dexterity saving throw. A creature takes 2d10 bludgeoning damage and 4d6 cold damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. Hailstones turn the ground in the cylinder into difficult terrain until the end of your next turn. This spell is 1 level higher than Fireball, and it does less damage than an upcast Fireball, and it's a similar area as Fireball. The one difference with the area is that it's a cylinder instead of a sphere. So because of that, if there's any flying enemies that are about 40 feet up in the air, you can hit them with this as well. But one of the things that I like about it is the fact that it is a 300-foot range. You can cast this from very, very far away, and then it makes the area difficult terrain. So if you're a spellcaster that really wants to affect the battlefield, but you want to stay as far away from danger as possible, Ice Storm is a really good spell for that. Not only that, the bludgeoning damage scales instead of the cold damage when you upcast it, and the bludgeoning damage is a d10, unlike the cold damage being a d6. So it scales a bit better than other spells do as you upcast it. Unfortunately, it is bludgeoning damage though, and even though we don't fully have the new monster manual out, it seems that resistance to bludgeoning damage is going to be a bigger deal, and it doesn't matter if it's magical or not now. Also, unlike a lot of other cold damage spells, it's a dex save instead of a constitution save, which even though dex saves aren't the best saves, if you have found a way to restrain a creature, then they automatically fail their dexterity saving throws. That might be part of my next build video, maybe. You'll see. And then the difficult terrain just doesn't hurt. Might as well, you know? With that all being said, I'm putting Ice Storm in A tier. Alright, we're at 5th level spells now with Cone of Cold. Cone of Cold is one of the D&D community's favorite cold damage spells, I would say, in my opinion. It's a 5th level spell with an action to cast, and I feel like this is the main reason why. It is the 60-foot cone. You unleash a blast of cold air. Each creature in a 60-foot cone originating from you makes a constitution saving throw, taking 8d8 cold damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. A creature killed by this spell becomes a frozen statue until it thaws. The damage increases by 1d8 for each spell slot level above 5th. So Cone of Cold does a ton of damage in one of the biggest area of effects there is in the game. A 60-foot cone is massive, and even though it's a constitution saving throw, it being a 5th level spell, there's a high likelihood that your spell save DC is pretty high by now, because you've probably maxed out your casting stat. So it makes the con save a little less worrisome than it is with lower level spells, in my opinion. One negative thing about cone spells though is it's very hard to not get your friends in it, especially with it being so large. And so it's not quite an S tier spell for me because it still has a bit of clunkiness to it, and you have to be careful and use it wisely. So that being said, I'm putting Cone of Cold in A tier. Alright, we have another spell from the Elemental Evil Player's Companion. It is a 6th level spell, and it is Investiture of Ice. All the investiture spells are not very good, but I'll go ahead and read it. We have a level 6 spell, so very high spell slot, action to cast, concentration for 10 minutes. Until the spell ends, ice rimes your body, and you gain the following benefits. You are immune to cold damage and have resistance to fire damage. In the right fight, this is very good, and probably the best part of the spell. You can move across difficult terrain created by ice or snow without spending extra movement. The ground in a 10-foot radius around you is icy and is difficult terrain for creatures other than you. The radius moves with you. You can use your action to create a 15-foot cone of freezing wind extending from your outreached hand in a direction you choose. Each creature in the cone must make a Constitution saving throw. A creature takes 4d6 cold damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful save. A creature that fails its save against this effect has its speed halved until the start of your next turn. There's a lot going on with this spell. I don't consider it very good, as I said earlier. The main problem is the action to use the cone ability. It's not a bonus action, it's an action. And if you're a spellcaster with 6 level slots, you have a lot of great things to do with your action. The only character I could see this useful for is a warlock, just because they have such a low amount of spell slots. Let's say you're out of all your spell slots, except you have your 6th level Mystic Arcanum, and you cast Investiture of Ice. It gives you a solid damage ability that you can use throughout the rest of the fight, as long as you maintain concentration. But some of the synergies don't really work very well. If you want to be immune to cold damage, you probably don't want to be doing a cold damage attack, because you're probably fighting something that does cold damage and is resistant to cold damage as well. So I feel like this spell is definitely a dud in my book, but it does give you a good immunity and resistance, so I'm going to put it in C tier. All right, next we have Otiluke's Freezing Sphere. 6th level spell, action to cast. Just like Ice Storm, it has a 300-foot range. A frigid globe streaks from you to a point of your choice within range, where it explodes in a 60-foot radius sphere. Each creature in that area must make a Constitution saving throw, taking 10d6 cold damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. If the globe strikes a body of water, it freezes the water to a depth of 6 inches over a 30 feet square. This ice lasts for 1 minute. Creatures that were swimming on the surface of frozen water are trapped in the ice and have the restrained condition. A trapped creature can take an action to make a strength athletics check against your spell save DC to break free. You can refrain from firing the globe after completing the spell's casting. If you do so, a globe about the size of a single bullet, cool to the touch, appears in your hand. At any time, you or a creature you give the globe to can throw the globe to a range of 40 feet or hurl it with a sling to the sling's normal range. It shatters on impact with the same effect as a normal casting of the spell. You can also set the globe down without shattering it. After 1 minute, if the globe hasn't already shattered, it explodes. That last sentence would make it really good for an evil character, in my opinion. Just leave a little globe in the marketplace and walk away, you know? This spell is really good, in my opinion. It does a ton of damage. It has a lot of really unique effects depending on the situations you're in. It has a lot of flexibility with casting it. It basically has the effects of Rime's Binding Ice, but only in a water surface. If you're ever playing a nautical campaign, I would highly recommend playing an ice-based character. You're gonna be really powerful once you get 6th level spell slots. And it does upcast by 1d6 for every level you upcast it, but you're probably not gonna upcast that. With that being said though, I don't think it's broken, and I think it's very appropriate for a level 6 spell, so I'm gonna be putting it in A tier. And we now have the last spell on our list. There are higher level spells that do cold damage, but it's not important to the spell. It's just one of the damage choices you can pick. Or it's kind of weird like Storm of Vengeance, where the 4th round of combat, it specifically does ice damage only then. So I feel like it's not really worth talking about. But that being said, we have the 6th level spell, Wall of Ice. Wall of Ice is an action to cast, a range of 120 feet, and it is a concentration spell with a duration of 10 minutes. You create a wall of ice on a solid surface within a range. You can form it into a hemispherical dome or a globe with a radius up to 10 feet, or you can shape a flat surface made up of 10 10-foot square panels. Each panel must be contiguous with another panel. In any form, the wall is 1 foot thick and lasts for the duration. If the wall cuts through a creature's space when it appears, the creature is pushed to one side of the wall. You choose which side and make a dexterity saving throw, taking 10d6 cold damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. The wall is an object that can be damaged and thus breached. It has an AC of 12 and 30 hit points per 10-foot section, and it has immunity to cold, poison, and psychic damage, and vulnerability to fire damage. Reducing a 10-foot section of wall to 0 hit points destroys it and leaves behind a sheet of frigid air in the space the wall occupied. A creature moving through the sheet of frigid air for the first time on its turn makes a Constitution saving throw, taking 5d6 cold damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. Using a higher level spell slot, the damage the wall deals when it appears increases by 2d6, and the damage from passing through the sheet of frigid air increases by 1d6 for each spell slot level above 6. Okay, that was a lot of words. I feel like there's a very important context I need to give for this spell, because you probably haven't heard of it unless you played a wizard, because it's only available to the wizard. I like this spell. I think it's very good, but you're a wizard. You probably have access to Wall of Force, and you're probably casting that. Unlike Wall of Force though, this spell can actually do a lot of damage on the initial casting of it if you place it really well. It being 10 10-foot panels means you can place it in a lot of creative ways, and with it being vulnerable to fire damage, damage and having 30 hit points per panel, you could do a pretty interesting spell combo on the second round, or by having another spellcaster cast Fireball onto the wall of ice if you're not looking to control the battlefield as much, because the targets will take the initial wall of ice damage, and then if you Fireball them, they'll take the regular Fireball damage, plus if they then move on their turn to try to get to you or a party member, then they'll be taking the 5d6 cold damage as well. Unfortunately, the spell doesn't specify if it's opaque, so it's still up in the air whether it's clear see-through ice or if it's more of a glacier opaque ice. I would rule that the wall is opaque, but I could see the argument for it being clear. It being 10d6 cold damage on the initial casting, and then having a potential second damage instance, as well as being a good control spell, I would put this spell in A tier. It's not overpowered for its level, and I think it very much deserves a level 6 spell slot. And there's our final tier ranking. As you can see, cold damage spells have a lot of really good options, with the majority of them actually being in A tier. Let me know if you agree with my tier list in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, next week I'm coming out with a cold damage based character build. So I'd love it if you subscribe, maybe tap the bell if you'd like, and you'll get a notification when I release that video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again soon. Peace out and happy holidays.